Brother Eric, thank you so much for that very kind introduction. I think you're talking about Judy. But anyway, I'm delighted to be here tonight. Welcome everyone to our Thursday night, our ongoing Thursday night insightful conversations. And well, Brother Eric is correct. We kind of do outdo ourselves every week, and I was really looking forward to it this week. The month, October, the discussion is about nonviolence in action. And I love that because action is an active word. It's a verb rather than a passive thing. When we think of nonviolence, we think of avoidance and, just ignoring or letting things be. But this is a discussion, and the whole month we'll talk about how we have to take action for nonviolence. And who better than with Judy Rodgers, Sister Judy Rodgers. And the topic tonight is especially compelling. It's nonviolence in relationships. And I have to tell you, I've been thinking about this a lot, and tis the season in terms of reading and learning that it is all about relationships, be it your family, be it at work, be it countries. It's all relationships. It starts with our relationship, in my opinion, with God and how we emulate that love in our relationships with others. So this is going to be a wonderfully fascinating discussion. And Judy, can you indulge me for 1 minute? I wanted to read a poem. I heard this yesterday. Is that okay?
It's wonderful.
Okay, I heard this yesterday, and it was very timely. Just to give a little background, it was Yom Kippur yesterday, which is about forgiveness and relationships. And this poem I heard, and I churned on it and realized in everything about what I do now is tied to what I'm learning here, and it enhances it. So when I heard this poem, I thought, wow, I can use this. This is by Yehuda Amichai, who a self-proclaimed person meaning self-proclaimed that he devoted his life to peace and reconciliation. So from the place where we are right, flowers will never grow in the spring. The place where we are right, the place where we are right is hard and trampled like a yard. But doubt and loves dig up the world like a mole, like a plow, and a whisper will be heard in the place where the ruined house once stood. So I think this is about where we are right. And oftentimes in our relationships, if I would ask, who wants to be right? Most people want to be right. It feels good for a moment, but then when relationships, it doesn't always feel right. So I'm very excited to introduce Judy. If you've been here before, and many of you have, I see some of the people, Sister Judy. I'm going to give you just a little touch of what her bio says. It's really quite special. Judy Rodgers works as a consultant and a communication strategist for businesses and universities. She emphasizes the power of the narrative, and you'll hear that. Narrative and strength-based inquiry as a catalyst for transformation in individuals as well as organizations. And relationships are not just with individuals, it's in organizations and, dare I say, governments and countries, and we'll hear about that tonight. As you know, Judy is also a Raja Yoga meditation teacher. Her focus is on how the consciousness affects everything we think, say, and do. And she is a founder and board president of Images and Voices of Hope, an NGO that seeks to strengthen the role of media and agents for world benefit. Boy, that's very important work. Just thinking of that. I did not turn on any social media today. I'm very proud of myself today. In essence, from yesterday. And you know what? It was bad. And it was trying to get in there, and I ignored it. So just wanted to pitch that to you. It was hard, but it was good. It's trying to get in there. But with that, welcome, Sister Judy. A delight to have you, and looking forward to our conversation today.
Thank you, Michelle. I love the poem. And I'm glad that you had the holiday. All of us need that kind of reflection, It really changes everything. I just want to say I'm looking at a sea of names floating
Yes.
in black,
Yes,
and
this
it's
is
a
my
little hard.
mark. I was asked to have everyone, if you will, please turn on your video, your cameras,
Oh,
so
nice.
Sister Judy could see you, and I could see you too.
It would allow us to actually just kind of talk to you. Otherwise, I'm just talking to names. So
Right. So
if you're
please,
not in an awkward
if
place, it
you're
would
not
be
right,
very nice to
right.
actually see a face or
Yeah,
two.
we'd like to see your. That would be great. Welcome,
Thank you,
welcome, Gita. Thank
Gita.
you,
Thank you.
Marty.
I
Thank you.
appreciate it. I can look at you all evening if no
Okay.
one else turns on their camera.
Thank you.
And
Thank
if
you.
anyone else would like to do that, that would be very
Please.
nice.
Right.
Thank you,
Let people
Amit.
know, typically we don't do this. We just focus on the presenter, but this is a special request from Judy. She
Yes,
wanted
it's a
to-
request from me because I don't like to look at myself, and that's what the other looks like. So Mardai, thank you. Amit, thank you. Gita, thank you. And the others, if you get the courage, I'd love it, but I'm ready to speak with you regardless. Even if I can't see your name, and even if you're a little bit dark, I know you're there. So, as Michelle said, this month we're all thinking about nonviolence, ahimsa, and we are doing that because of the wonderful Mahatma Gandhi. This is his month. And, you know, it's really important that we think about nonviolence in these times. And so I'm going to make sure I leave some time in the event you want to talk about specific things, but I'm going to do a little bit of a journey through this topic, starting with this business of Gandhi. So before Gandhi made his commitment to nonviolence, he wrote a treatise we know as Satyagraha, Experiments with Truth. And when he was doing his experiments with truth, he put himself in a bit of a container. He committed to vegetarianism, he committed to celibacy, he committed to a lot of kind of private acts of simplicity and truth in order to come to what he felt was necessary in the times. And what he came to was what the world came to know as ahimsa, or nonviolence. We know that others then picked it up. Martin Luther King's one of the famous ones, Nelson Mandela also, and they applied this in circumstances that were impossible, right? It would absolutely impossible. There's no way anyone in their right mind would have gone into the American South with a commitment of nonviolence, or gone out, faced off with apartheid with a commitment of nonviolence. And yet, these stories, which we know now so well, right, of these leaders inspired by Gandhi, really tell us that there's a great power in nonviolence. You know, I think some people could think that nonviolence is a weak stance, that, well, you don't really want to fight, therefore I'm a nonviolent person. But no, nonviolence is an extremely powerful stance. It takes a lot of power. And I want to talk with you about that a little bit later, but this is not for the faint-hearted. And yet, each of you who are here tonight, are not the faint-hearted. You are the powerful ones. And so that's why we're going to talk about this tonight. So let's start with the kind of obvious question: what's violence? Now, we are in a culture where there's no shortage of answers on this one, right? Any day in the news, unfortunately, we have lots of examples that are just hard to read, hard to think about. But I would submit to you that that is only part of the story. That is only what they say, the tip of the iceberg. Because before someone yells obscenities or breaks things or shoots things or harms people or all of those things that we've become too familiar with, there's already a layer of violence inside. Violence doesn't come from nowhere, right? It's not just like someday violence just shows up and a person erupts. There is a ground underneath in which this violence is living inside the self. And so when we think about violence and when we think about nonviolence, we have to think about both the outer expression and the inner phenomenon. So in the same way that violence has that riveting outward expression, so does nonviolence, right? When you see that brave little Malala stand up with her headscarf and her father standing off to the side, she's being extremely courageous and nonviolent. And when you see Greta Thunberg take her long, slow trip across the ocean because she refuses to fly, and people goading her, journalists goading her, etc., maintaining composure in those settings, that's nonviolence. You know, when you see, there's so many examples of when people have stood up in settings where they could have taken a violent response, but they didn't. That's quite inspiring for us. So both the expression of violence, the expression of nonviolence, the soil of those is inside the self. So when we talk about violence and nonviolence, we're talking about the cultivation of an inner state that allows us to be that way. And I would submit that even though violence looks more powerful, that actually it's the weaker of the two. That the stronger stance, the powerful stance, is the nonviolent stance. So let's think about this business of violence inside of ourselves and nonviolence inside of ourselves. So we know, I would imagine, unless this is the very first time you've ever come on to a Brahma Kumari's program, which I don't know, is there someone who's here for the very, very first time? You can use a little reaction thing here to let me know. Put your hand up. I'm thinking that you have been here before, that you are our friends, and that you're familiar with the territory. As you know, this is spiritual territory. We're not going to talk about police responses. We're not going to even talk about the psychology so much. We're talking about a spiritual stance. And what we need to pause on for a minute is to understand the true self, who we really are. Because if we're very frustrated with something in our lives, or feel very disappointed or very like the victim in our lives, we can get the feeling that that disappointment or that irritation or anger or frustration is our nature. And if we live with someone who is worked up a lot, we can get the feeling that that's their nature, but actually it's not. Actually, the nature of each soul, of each being, is completely pure, completely peaceful, imperturbable, undisturbable, contented, loving without end, in this kind of unlimited love and joy. That is the nature of the self. If you've ever seen a newborn and their little goofy heads that they can't quite hold up, and they're, you're trying to make eye contact with them, and they're trying to hold their heads up, and you realize there's sweetness, that's who each one is. We are those beautiful, delicious, sweet, peaceful, pure, loving, blissful, kind souls. That is our nature. Anything other than that, anything that robs us of our peace or our purity or our goodness or our love or our joy is a kind of violence. And usually we are the ones who rob ourselves of these things. We don't mean to. We don't set out to do that. But what happens to us as we have different experiences is that we become attached to the things in the outside world. And we begin wanting things in the outside world. We develop a kind of inner emptiness. We feel we're not enough. We're not peaceful enough. We have to go find it somewhere, go to a lake, go listen to music, go do something else to get it back. We're not loving enough. We have to go find it somewhere else. Someone else will love us and then we'll have love. We're not happy enough, so we have to kind of entertain ourselves, cheer ourselves up. And as we do that, we become attached to things on the outside. And those things on the outside begin to weaken the soul. And eventually the soul finds itself carrying a fair amount of sorrow and a fair amount of heaviness and disappointment, and worse sometimes, depending on the experience that they've had. So when that happens inside, now we have the soil for the lashing out that we do. We don't mean, this is our child. We didn't mean to yell at them, but how many times have I told them to clean their room? Or how many times have I told them to call me when they're safely at somebody's house? Or how many times have I told them that they can't do such and such, or they need to do such and such, and we just blow up? Or at a spouse, or at a sibling, or at a parent, this helpless parent, can't you do this? Right? And then we feel so bad that we did that. I think, why did I do that? What was I thinking? I didn't need to do that or say that. But it came from that inner kind of soil, that inner state that had become weak, that lashing out. And before we think we're hurting the other person, we feel bad about what we did. We feel bad about what we said, but actually the one we harmed is who? Right? I mean, I felt the anger. I felt the disappointment. It was here. They got a little bit of it, but I got the whole load, right? And the other thing is, if I act that way, what's the law of karma? Comes right back at me, right? So my anger comes right back at me like a boomerang. My upset, my disappointment, my frustration, my sorrow, my this, my that comes right back. So this business about what happens to us when this inner state develops that way, we end up, every one of those moods, every one of those feelings, every one of those states that I just described, disappointment, frustration, anger, irritation, every one of those has a vibration, right? Anger has a vibration. Frustration has a different vibration. Disappointment, a vibration. Sorrow, a vibration. So each time we hold those feelings, we're creating a vibrational field around us. Our actions come out of that. Our speaking comes out of that. But before I ever open my mouth, I've already allowed that state to be inside. I've already created that field of vibrations. I mean, we know there's not any of us who haven't walked into a room after someone's been angry. And even if the fight is over, you can feel it. It hangs in the air, right? You know. And conversely, if people are in a loving, laughing place, you pick that up the minute you walk in, right? You know. How do you know? You didn't overhear it. Nobody sent you a text. We are vibrational beings. We pick these things up. So nonviolence isn't just about, not about marching across the bridge in Montgomery, Alabama. Nonviolence is about the inner state we sustain. And I'm going to guess that if you're here tonight for this talk, that you probably have a meditation practice. Is that right? Meditation practice, some kind? Can you use your little reaction thing? Let me see how many of you actually have a practice. Okay, Mitch, practice. Cheryl, practice? Sherry, yeah. Okay, Gita, practice. How about the rest of you? You have a practice? Yeah, Lisa, good. Okay, all right. So let me follow up with you. Do you have a daily practice? Daily? Every day? Okay, because if you're going to make the shift we're talking about here, so that you don't send out those vibrations from inside, so that you don't react, the way that you'll be able to do that is through your practice. Because at least with Raj Yoga, what you're doing is you're taking your true self, the inner self, with whatever emptiness it has, you're connecting to the source, which is this totally peaceful, totally powerful, pure, loving, kind, compassionate, blissful, etc. And you're invoking those things into the self. And you're holding those states. And the more practice you do, the stronger you become. How do you know if you're strong? You get a test, right? Somebody blows up at you. Somebody pulls out in front of you in traffic. Somebody lets you down again. The same person who's let you down a million times. But this time, instead of reacting, you hold in that different place. And as you're holding, the awareness comes to you. What does the situation need? Does it need my anger? Do I need to tell this soul one more time how disappointed I am in them? Does that do anything to improve them? Does it do anything to get the situation moving in the right direction? Or have I just released this atmosphere of sorrow again, which is its own kind of violence, right? So what you're doing with your meditation practice, just like what Mahatma Gandhi was doing with Satyagraha, is you are doing your own experiments with truth. Peace is truth. Now we're defining truth as a thing that is eternal. It is an original state. It's a state we return to. We may lose our peace, but peace is the substance of which eternal souls are made. It's the substance of which the Supreme Soul is made. It's truth. So our experiment with truth is our experiment with being able to sustain a peaceful state. Now, it's easy to be peaceful when you're walking in the park, right? Can we be peaceful when someone blows up at us? That's when we're tested, right? Now, going back to the laws of karma, when someone blows up at us, they yell at us, they throw something or worse, that's on them. That's their karma. What I do next is on me. That's my karma. And this is where nonviolence comes in. So if someone really triggers me, they do something that really upsets me, am I strong enough? Has my practice strengthened me enough that I can inside have the feeling, that poor soul, that soul is really distressed, really off center. That soul needs my good wishes. And hold in that place of peace, even if we don't say anything. Even if we're just looking at the soul. That feeling we have, that good wish we have, creates a vibrational field. Right? Just like the other states do, bhavana, as that's called, that loving good wish, creates a field. Now, that one blew up and gets the karmic return of that. I created this field of love and good wishes. So what's the karmic return for me? I get the karmic return of my love and good wishes. Right? Is this easy? No. No. That's why we're talking about Mahatma Gandhi. He's like world famous, right? Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela. We're talking about, if you ask anybody in the world, you stop someone on the street and you say, who are the great personalities of the 20th century? Those are the names you get, those same three names. They might throw in Mother Teresa if you get the right person. Why do we talk about them? Because they pulled off this amazing thing. This amazing thing. They should not have been able to do this, and yet they did it. So should we just probably give up because, like, we're not going to be Gandhi, right? Of course, the answer to that is you can't give up, because you do have to be Gandhi. You do have to be Martin Luther King. You do have to be Nelson Mandela on your field of action. Because there aren't enough souls who are showing up and bringing this quality of response, or even this quality of inner state right now. We have to be able to do this. Because if we don't do it, who's going to do it? Right? I mean, it's not like, what, you call the police and hope they come over and bring peace to the house? Don't think so. No, it's not happening. What are we going to do? We're going to call, 9/11 and hope they bring peace to the house? We're going to, no, there is no one else to call. Look behind you. There is no one in line to call. You are it. We are each it. In the fields of influence in which we work, we are the ones who have to be able to understand deeply and put into action real nonviolence. So this means we have to be able to first notice our inner state, right? I mean, that's one of the first things you notice when you get serious about your spiritual practice is you're recognizing your different states. You notice when you're not okay, right? You notice when you've kind of been triggered by something. You notice when someone just gave you sorrow. If you accepted sorrow in your heart, you notice that. So that's the first step, is you're even noticing. Most people aren't even aware of the state they're in. And that's the truth. If you think about people you work with or who live in your building or family members, they aren't even aware. They're just on automatic pilot all the time. So first you notice. Once you notice, you say, okay, I think I know what to do here. I need to be able to detach a little bit. I need to be able to step back. I need to be able to create a little silence around me. If necessary, you excuse yourself. You say, you know what, I need about 10 minutes. I'll be back. Right? You quiet yourself down. And then you invoke your practice. And if you're doing it every day, then in that moment, you'll be able to do that. Because your mind will know, oh yeah, we do this every day. Yeah, I know what I have to do here. Your mind gets quiet, gets peaceful, still, and it begins to hold that state. Then you go back to the situation and you're able to bring real power to that situation. I know that there are things we have to think about, like what if you're actually in danger? Right. So just to be clear, if you're actually in physical danger of being harmed, you don't have to stay in the dangerous situation and be nonviolent. You can leave the dangerous situation and still do the same thing we're talking about, right? You should never put yourself physically at risk. When we're talking about spiritual things, we're talking about the inner states that produce the outer states. So don't confuse, that business of being physically safe with the business of being nonviolent. What if you live with someone who's violent, right? What if you live with someone who's just got a big temper and throws things and, gets upset and all of that? Again, you have to make sure that all the physical things are in place, but then you do what you can to create that powerful atmosphere, because there's no way to gauge the impact of the field of peace, the field of contentment, the feeling of that field of bhavana that you create. It's very powerful. It makes a big change in people. Even though it's less visible. I think sometimes we think visible things are more powerful, but actually invisible things are more powerful. So I want to make another point, but I just want to check in with you first, because I'm touching on things that could be tender business. Does anyone have anything in your heart, anything you're feeling or thinking that you want to reflect out loud on? Any question, any thought about any of it? Karma. What do I do if I live with someone like this?
We've opened up the chat, so if anybody has something, they can put that down, and that will come to you as a response to your inquiry.
Okay. So feel free to put something in the chat, or feel free to just mention anything. What do we do about these situations that are so giant in the world, that break our hearts, right? Some of them are people being violent. Some of them are nature, right? Look what happened with Hurricane Ian. That's its own kind of violence, right? And I think sometimes we can feel like we're a little bit helpless with all of that. Like, what in the world can we do? The whole thing is so turbulent and so unpredictable. I think we can feel like there's kind of a violence at large in the world, right? A turbulence, and it's true, there is, but we're not helpless in that, actually. And I think this again has to do with an inner stance. So what we know about our times is that everything happens very suddenly. We don't get a lot of advance warning. Used to be that, we kind of knew what was coming. The trends were a little more predictable, but that's not the case now. Now things are really, really volatile and unpredictable. So the inner stance has to be a kind of readiness. And we have to maintain that readiness without being in a state of fear or alarm, right? Because you don't want to be afraid all the time. You don't want to be tense all the time that anything could happen. And that's happening for some people. Some people are feeling a lot of anxiety about the times we're in. And so for those of us who have moved onto a spiritual path, what we're really exploring is the energies that we're creating, the vibrations that we're creating, the subtle pathway. One way to understand the time we're in. So we understand, the Brahma Kumaris understand that the time we're in is really special, really highly unusual and really special. That it is a time of both a hard time, a time when things are settling, karmas are settling and things seem to be falling apart, and also a profound time of creation. So one way to think about it is that there's actually two energies at work right now. There is a descending energy of breakdown that's at work, and it's very noisy and very visible, right? Things are falling apart. Things that we thought would never fall apart are falling apart and creating a real destabilization. But there's also an ascending energy at work at the same time. The ascending energy is much quieter. It's a much more subtle energy. This is the energy of God's presence in the world. It's the energy of the souls who are connecting to God, who are creating these more elevated fields of vibrations. And you can feel them. Those of you who are meditating pretty much, you will feel them. You will feel them in people you meet, right? There's communities all over the world who are coming together to create this kind of goodness, peace, sweetness, strength, etc. But it's a much more subtle phenomenon. So you have these two things going on, and in the middle, we're trying to manage our lives. Now, each time that we're confronted with a situation, we often have two kinds of choices. One choice is to see the terrifying thing. Here comes Ian, the cone of whatever up Florida. Here comes whatever, the stock market's plunging, pick your trauma. We can connect with that and go, oh my God, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to those condos? What's going to happen to those people? What's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to our, right? I mean, that's one whole movie. That movie runs in the mind. Oh my God, what's going to happen, right? Or we can connect with the ascending energy, which is the energy of reassurance. It's the energy of peace. It's the energy of lightness. It's the energy of transcendence. Because when we talk about truth, we're talking about the thing that doesn't go away, the non-material thing, the souls, the spiritual energy that's inside of the material world. So when we connect with the ascending energy, we're connecting with that. That's our experiment with truth. That's our satyagraha. We connect with that truth, not with the thing that's falling apart, not with the thing that is on the descending energy. but we connect with the ascending energy. Now, depending on what choice we make, we grow one pool of energy or the other one. So if I make a choice to connect with the terrifying, the frightening, the falling apart, then I'm adding my field of distress to the big pool of distress that the world is creating. And I enlarge that pool of distress. And conversely, if I show up, and again, this has to do with my practice, right? So every morning I'm there, I'm invoking peace, I'm pulling God into my awareness, I'm in touch with my deeper, purer self. I'm moving into a place of love. I'm responding to everything with love. So I'm developing that spiritual muscle. So when these big things happen in the world, instead of moving into terror and distress, I touch into the truth of it. That is, that there's a pure world being generated. The old one is falling apart, but there is a truth inside of this. And that's what I connect to. And whether it manifests itself as the people who are helping, or these hero stories, how many of these hero stories do we hear, people helping each other and reaching out, etc. And however it touches you, when you touch into that with your vibrational field of trust and compassion and love and peace and sweetness, now you've enlarged that pool. Right? And our understanding is that actually this is how the world transforms, is that eventually this pool, this powerful pool or field of peace, love, power, truth, bliss becomes the dominant field. Because it is the lasting one. It's the one connected with truth. Now, you have to have spiritual vision to see this. Otherwise, you think I'm making this up, right? But I'm not making it up. You know, this comes with your spiritual practice. You get this, what we call divine vision. And you can see both, right? You can see the world of matter. You can see that it's turbulent and wild and violent, but you can also see this spiritual these upcurrents, updrafts of spiritual energy. And as you get stronger, you realize that in any given moment, you have a choice. You don't have to have the big reaction. You don't have to move into anger and fear and anxiety and worry. You can make the choice to connect with these higher vibrations and to offer those to everybody in your connection. Because, you know, if there's someone we know, even if they don't live in the house with us, or maybe they don't even live in the city with us, they get the vibrations that we put out on some subtle level. Do you ever know, you think of someone and they call you? You know, you sit down to write the letter and their letter arrives first. I mean, that kind of thing, it makes you realize that our subtle connections with each other are quite strong. So taking this understanding, then we say, okay, how are we going to live in this world? How are we going to live in this world and not feel despair? How are we going to live in this world and not feel sorrow? Right? Because we've had the habit, over our lifetimes, we've had the habit of kind of being open. And whatever showed up, we just took it inside. So if somebody was upset, we were upset. If somebody was yelling in the street, we felt they're upset inside. We just kind of picked everything up and carried it around inside. But you know, we don't have to do that. I mean, that's kind of the, you know, when you go for a walk in the woods, all those little burrs end up on your socks, right? But we don't have to go through life like that with all those things attaching to us. We can choose. We can say, you know what? I'm not going to take this sorrow. I'm not going to take this anger. I'm not going to take this upset or this despair. I'm not going to let it inside. Now, we may make some choices about that. We may say, I'm not going to look at images that distress me, or I'm going to move myself towards people that are more uplifting for me. I'll still have good wishes for these other ones, but I'm not going to be in that heavy energy all the time. So we make certain choices about that. But even if we have to be around those things, we don't have to let them in our heart. That's a habit. It's a habit of taking sorrow. It's a habit of allowing ourselves to be upset. And as your practice continues, you become aware that some people make a hobby out of being upset. The first time you meet them, they start listing all the things that are wrong with their body or all the things that are wrong with their life, right? I mean, it's predictable because you've known them so long, you can almost do the list for them. So you can say to yourself, okay, this person's in my life. I'm not going to move them out of my life. I'm not going to move away from them, but I'm not going to take their sorrow. I'm not going to take their distress. I'm not going to take their anxiety, their worry, their anger. I'm not going to pick it up. And so you have kind of a field of light around you, and you're able to give to them. Now, this is about who influences who, right? That's kind of what life's about, is who influences who. Do they influence you, or do you influence them? And this goes back again to your meditation practice. If you have become powerful, then you are able to influence them. Now, you become powerful because you become full of the quality. So if I meditate every morning on peace, and if when I'm moving through on the Long Island Railroad or the E-train or the whatever, I'm in a state of peace, and I keep filling myself up with peace, I connect to the divine, I pull in peace, I keep invoking it. When I'm full of peace, I then have the power of peace, which means I can then call on peace. So if someone in front of me is peaceless, because I'm full of peace, I can donate peace, right? You see those statues of the saints? What are they doing? What's this about, right? That's what it is. May things go well for you. May you be at peace. May you find what you're looking for. May things be okay. Now, when you're able to do that, no matter what they're doing, now you're influencing them. And it can be one person who lives in your house or on your street, or it can be a whole bunch of sad people who've just gone through something. A grocery store in Buffalo, a school in Texas. You can sit in that consciousness and donate that compassion. Because what you've done is you've pulled the thought and the feeling forward inside of you. You hold the thought of where you're sending it, and then you just sit connected above and sending that thought. Not only have you made yourself peaceful, not only have you enlarged that pool of peace, but you've also served those souls. Now, what happens when we serve like that? What happens? What's the karmic return of that? It comes right back to us, right? I mean, if I'm sending peace out there, the karmic return of that is peace back here. This is service. You can also write a check, join a first responders group. I mean, you can do the physical things too, but the service is the state you're in. Because if you do the physical thing, but you're in the wrong space, then you actually haven't been able to serve very well. right? I mean, if you're at a soup kitchen, but you're upset and angry, then what are they getting with your soup, right? They're getting the vibe of your anger. I mean, actually, just as long as we're on the subject of food, do you think the energy of the cook goes into the food? All right, so now I do too. So I'm just asking you, when you go to a restaurant, do you poke your head in the kitchen and just check on the state of the cook? Say, excuse me, I like your French toast, but I got to tell you, I want to know, were you thinking about God while you were making that French toast? I mean, it's just a thought, because everything we do carries the vibration we have inside, right? What Gandhi was saying with Satyagraha was that once he became vegetarian, once he made his life simple, once he became, in his case, celibate, once he did all those experiments, he did many of them, now he was prepared to lead a nonviolent revolution. It's the same with us. It's the same with us. Our experiments with truth are what prepare us to live in a nonviolent way, in a peaceful way, in a peaceless world. That's service. And it allows us also to be in a state of contentment, because we have the faith that we know that the thing that is lasting is the truth, that ascending energy. Ultimately, that will be what comes forward in time. That will be what's in front of us. So we put our shoulder to that wheel. We lean into that. We say, all right, let me be a part of this. And we have our own little nonviolent revolution right in our apartments or houses or jobs or whatever. So let me just pause and see if there's anyone who wants to say anything. Michelle, you want to weigh in?
Well, as always, I have lots of comments. Number one, I want to tap into what you had said. The fact that all of you are here tonight and you're on the journey, that spiritual journey, what you said really stuck was it's almost like an obligation, because we're on this path to work hard to give out to people, because I see the other side as well of people who, as you said, aren't even aware, even starting at that you are so far ahead of the game that you have almost an obligation to tilt. It's almost like a tug of war. Sure. And that tug, I want, certainly I see your faces week after week, and I get to know you even through the vibrations, that you are just kind, sweet people. Just the fact that you're in these little boxes tells me a lot about you. And that being said, it's almost on us. It's God's ask of us that gives us so much that I'm going to double down then and give out and work even harder. But it's not work, because as Judy, you pointed out, you get so much in return. Right. So it seems like work, but the results, and I think what you had said, the more you do it, the more you practice, like I used to love that instant karma. Sometimes it could be instant. The more you do it, I find that sometimes it comes right back. Right. So I think that's what the practice is, that you don't have to wait long for the return. That's one thing. I just want to pitch one more thing, and I don't think it's a coincidence when you had mentioned, I laughed, about the subway, and I take the Long Island Railroad and the E-train a lot. And someone had asked me what my, what do I think of it? And that person was quite disturbed about it. Oh, the subway. Oh, look at the railroad. It's terrible. They're doing all this construction. But what's interesting in the morning, and some of you who listen with me in the morning to classes, I'm listening to class. So my reaction on the subway is actually quite nice. I find that people on the subway are delightful, because I think that is what I'm coming out of. I just came from class on the railroad. So, when people talk about, what do you see on the subway? I'm like, I think it's great. So I think it comes right back at you. So when you talk about experimenting, I'm not even aware that I'm experimenting. So I wondered if someone could comment about that in terms of, just flipping that switch and the return that you get. I think when I told that person, what do you think of the railroad? I'm like, seems good to me. That person had nothing to say. She was ready to like pitch and, it's terrible. But I said, it's actually pleasant. They moved on. They went to the next customer to complain. So I was just wondering if anyone had any comments about that in terms of that. It is an experiment, but I didn't know it was an experiment. But
They are experiments. And we've got a couple of little things that came in the chat here. They're private. So I hope it's okay if I talk about them. Is that okay, Cheryl? So Cheryl's saying the inner fear showed up during the hurricane, but saw with her inner eye an unhealed childhood trauma that just needed divine love. It was a better experience than the past hurricane. Cheryl here, that's great. And then my attitude with Brother Ian was, I'm going to bestow peace on you, not terror. That's great. Was one out of control storm, wasn't it? And then Amit, I'm not sure how to interpret this, what you've written. I don't know if you can clarify for me or not. But I know it's a pretty public forum, and so things are feeling private. But I would just say to you that, what each of us is feeling, although it feels very private and personal, what I find is that we all are holding very similar things in our hearts. We are feeling very similar things, and we're feeling the similar challenges. And the reason that it's so nice to come together like you all do, and of course, even better when we can come in person sometimes, is there's solidarity in that. You realize it's not just you. You're not alone with it. Whether it's the big cosmic situation that's terrifying us every night on that whatever monitor we watch on, or whether it's or whether it is sorry, I'm trying to make sense of this chat comment here. Or it's the thing that's in our own home. We're all dealing with very similar things. And I'll tell you one last thing here is that when a lot of people have the same experience, when a lot of people have the same emotion like anger itself becomes what would you call it, like a force. In other words, it goes beyond the people holding it. So it's almost like the weather. It's almost like a weather front of anger, or a weather front of upset, or a weather front of sorrow. And so what our practice does for us, it allows us to hold our own, you might say, our own calm breeze, our own sunshine, our own atmosphere against the force of the fear. Do you see what I'm saying? In other words, those powerful forces, places have energy. A place where there was a lot of sorrow will have the energy of sorrow, right? Now that can be shifted. Our strong, loving vibrations, the term we use is mansa seva, serving through the mind. So you can shift the atmosphere in a place that way. But you just have to be aware that in these times, there's a lot of that out there, right? And so you need to be able to protect yourself, and then you need to be able to help others. So that's an invitation. It's an invitation to community, to spiritual community, to solidarity, to your practice, to don't be afraid. You have to know everything's going to be fine. And it's going to be more fine because you are able to create these counter energies, these counter states. That's what's going to make it more fine. And so as you experiment with these truths and see the effect, because it's not that hard to see. I mean, you'll feel it immediately. You'll see it as soon as you do the experiments. Then you'll get a certain sense of confidence. We can do this. And we have to do this, right? Some people say this is the work of angels. You know, we actually work in that way. We're kind of like angels because our energy, we're working with the good vibrations and the sweetness that we have inside. So.
Well, I have a segue for you because the hour is getting late. So I was wondering on behalf, this is something that Jane had commented on about the beautiful power that you touched on of ascending energy. Mm-hmm. So with that, would you do a brief meditation about bring us to a place to keep that energy ascending?
Sure, let's do that together. So everyone get comfortable. You want your body to be comfortable. Your feet should either be under you, folded under you, or they should be on the floor. And your neck should be over your spine. Now take a deep breath. And just invite all of the kind of descending energies in your life. Just move away. While you stabilize yourself in a place of peace. Allow your mind to become quiet. Allow the thoughts to slow down. Until your mind is still. And you can feel your breath. Have the awareness that you are that spark of light sitting behind the eyes, experiencing the world through this body, seeing through these eyes, hearing through these ears, and have the thought, I am peace. I am peace. I'm the child of the ocean of peace. home is the land of peace. Become aware my breath is peace. And the field of vibrations around me are filled with peace. Now think of one soul you know who right now could use some peace. Experience the currents of peace. Coming from the divine and moving through you to that soul. And hold that one in peace. Om Shanti. I am peace.
I guess we have to come back. So I'm back. Thank you, Judy. It was wonderful. And thank you for that hour of allowing us to light in a place of peace. And that was just simply beautiful. Thank you. And thank you all for joining. I see some head shaking. Thank you for joining us again for our Thursday Insightful Conversations, Nonviolence in Action. And we were in action today. So thank you for that. It was an exciting evening, actually, and I think we have some tools to take back with us. We're going to be back next week with more nonviolent in action, and it's going to be, we touched on it tonight, but it's going to dive deeper into nonviolent communications. So that will be with our facilitator, will be Sister Tina Agarwal. We've had her, she's wonderful as well. We, as Brother Eric said, we're gonna wow you. And with that, thank you, Brother Eric, again for supporting us technologically, and thank you to God, the Supreme Soul, for allowing us all to be here, making it all possible. Thank you, and we'll see you next week. Om Shanti.
Thank you, Michelle, for hosting, and Judy, it was wonderful. Everybody appreciates your participation, and now it's your turn to use it. Be nonviolent, be peaceful, help the world. Enjoy. See you next Thursday. Om Shanti, everyone.
Om Shanti.